Well, thank you. All right, so I was telling you a little bit about myself and the department I am in, just to go back to that, we're a water wastewater utility. We're in the East Bay, and we consider the communities of our employees as well as the communities of those we serve, which is the ratepayers within our district. So I'm going to start off with just some basic information, just to give you more context. And the information is going to be primarily of like to hopefully answer the question of why. Why does EBMUD want to have an employee feedback program? You know, so let's see if I'm going to share this quickly. Can you all see my PowerPoint? I'm going to stop that view because I cannot see you. All right, let me do this one more time.
I have a feeling we're all relating to that.
Yes,
and you right there.
And here's the thing that's really funny. You would think I'm a lot better at this, but I've been giving these virtual classes for so long now. It's good to have it. Okay. So you see my slides now, right? Go ahead and verbally tell me if you can unmute yourself.
We see it.
Yeah. Okay, great. Okay, so this is really simple, high level. We're going to talk about where we were and where we would like to go. Okay. So just to give you a little bit of some context of some milestones for us. Back in 2014 and 15, we had hired a consultant group, and they helped us with some focus groups and some assessments because we wanted to gauge the culture of our organization at that point. And specifically, that work led us to actually establishing our organizational values. And that's when we finally adopted our official values of stewardship, integrity, respect, and teamwork. And those are our district values, and that was officially adopted in 2015. In 2016 and 17, out of the work from the consultant, we had established some cross-functional project teams. And those special project teams were asked to work on very specific focus for the district. So some focused on process improvements. There was a team for employee recognition. There was a team about organizational communication, another team about embedding the values within the organization, and then there were a few others. In addition to those cross-functional teams, we also had established a group of employees called the Values Advocates. And the Values Advocates are a grassroots type of effort where they are a number of employees from a variety of different departments and different locations and different tenures, where they got together and their first goal was to help embed the values and to also be an information conduit between different parts of the organization, because we're quite dispersed, as well as being an information conduit up and down the organization through different levels of employees and management. And more recently in 2020, we had established a racial equity and justice project that, not established, but we had proceeded to work on a racial equity and justice project and a diversity and inclusion master plan. And so with these projects and working on that plan, we have officially established the DEI strategic plan, which was established in 2022. And now, moving forward, our hope is to have an employee feedback program where some of the items we're most interested in at this point in time is all about internal communication, our organizational culture, long-term organizational wellness, as well as having an actual mechanism for employee feedback that would contribute to very specific action planning. And on the right there on the cycle is just our way of communicating to you how, at a very high level, how we would like to see that occur, where this program would basically, let's just say if we had data from the program, and that data that we collect from any assessments, any focus groups, anything like that, would actually inform the development of special programs or special projects, and that work would then be done, and the outcomes of that work would also be looked at, and all of that would be communicated. And then we would survey the employees on, oh, how did that go? And so it would come back to having more data, and then going ahead to reevaluate what we just did to see if there are more improvements moving forward. So
Laura,
yeah.
sorry, 1 second. What we see right now is just the slide deck, not the actual slides. So it's on the very first slide right now.
Oh, we're not seeing the actual. You're not seeing the. Let me stop sharing. I think I'm having a really bad day. So not a bad day, but a bad moment. Let me do this instead. Okay. All right. So this is the visual I was speaking to. And so ideally, what we're looking for is support from an organization or consultant who would be helping us in the development long term of the entire plan. Because where it is, as I told you with the years before, we had already somewhat to a certain degree assessed portions of the district. We never did a whole organization-wide survey. That never actually happened. We had moments in years past where we assessed what the experience was of certain samples of our organization, which specifically fed into the development of our values. And then, like I said earlier, I know you didn't see the outline because I wasn't able to show the slide. From the values, our focus on equity and justice and diversity and inclusion has become a focal point for a lot of our work. And in the interest of inclusion and understanding our culture, we do recognize it's important to capture the employee experience in a more broad sense, whether it be a survey or various surveys, more focus groups, things like that. But we're in a phase where we're open to seeing what's out there in regards to having a system that would be usable for our employee population. A lot of our employees, they are in the trades, or in construction, because we're a water and wastewater utility. Another huge portion of our, so you have a portion of outdoor trades, mechanical, those types of workers, and then you have a portion of office workers. which could be engineers, accountants, all your basics that you see within any government organization. So that just gives you a sense of the type of population we have. Now, some of you, I know I've been getting emails about the process of our RFP process. So at a very high level, just know we're going to try our best to answer those questions today. And we're also going to try to answer any questions you have about our organization. So I feel like that's an important aspect as well. Because what good is a survey if no one wants to read it and participate, right? So that's an important aspect is the approach we take, not only the work, but the approach we take to the subject. So what questions do you have? I'll stop talking.
I'll kick off. Thanks, Laura. I'm really curious. You mentioned just now that the audience that will be taking the survey is a mix of blue collar and white collar positions. Is that correct?
Yes.
Do you happen to have an estimate of how many staff fall into each of those categories for sort of a total idea of how many folks you're looking to put through this program?
Well, we have about 2,000 employees. I'm looking at 2 attendees here. My manager, Gary Noten's here. Do you know the percentage that are blue collar? I don't know off the top of my head.
Close to 50% of the staff is blue collar, and it's I will say blue collar or hybrid, because we have people who are not necessarily blue collar employees, but they're not at their desks all the day. They're out, whether that's inspectors or kind of a variety of other things. So
that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, because when I think of blue collar as well, we have plant operators, things like that. So people who are in different facilities are very specialized to functions of our business. So yeah. So.
And it sounds like they're relatively distributed virtual. What kind of geographic area does that cover? So
a lot of our major wastewater plant is Oakland. Our main administration building and other satellite offices, a lot of them are in Oakland. But we do have yards that a lot of our people report to in Walnut Creek, another one in Richmond. I'm trying to do the translation in my head because we have nicknames for those locations. And then Castaneda is considered kind of like
it's San Ramon.
That's San Ramon. Okay. And then the one by San Leandro, there's one in San Leandro. So those areas. And then we have Central Valley, which is Hardy, Comanche, as well as parts of Stockton, I think. Am I missing anything?
That's pretty accurate.
Sounds like pretty contained to NorCal, no employees tuning in from other states or time zones or anything like that to consider.
Okay. No, we have one person who goes to the Capitol who represents us for legislative stuff. And then we have one inspector, and that person has a cool job. They go all over the place because they inspect. I don't know. I just know I talked to this person once and I forgot what his job title is, but yeah. So very, very few are away from the area.
Sorry. Thank you so much for the clarification you have so far. Quick question along the same lines, but I understand accessibility is really important to you. And so a few questions there. One is, talk about multi-language. Which languages are most important to you? And secondary from that, you talked about having a specific link sent to each employee, as well as other methods that link with the way that they, that you connect with them. What are these, and what do you know what percentage of employees would say, for example, require a paper version, or if not, like how does that feel like for you?
And I'm glad you say feel like, because we don't have hard data. So disclosure, this is what it feels like to me. So given that roughly 50% are blue collar, individuals within that category, I feel like paper or text, because they're on their phones. A lot of people who aren't office bound are connecting to their phones. So those are two things. So text or mobile accessible and paper. A lot of us do use computers with email and all that other stuff, that's the traditional stuff. But yeah, roughly speaking, those would probably be the accessibility issues that would be most interesting to us. When you mentioned language, that's interesting because it is something that in regards to our documents and the way we work, we don't have a lot of alternative languages other than English that we use in our operations. Outward facing though with our customers, we do provide things in different languages. So it's something we're open to because, like I said earlier, anything that would result in an employee feeling like they trust the system, because when you're being assessed or surveyed, it's very personal, right? And we want to present that feeling that, okay, this is a trusted source. I can give information and it's safe. So if that means putting in a different language, maybe it's something to think about. But if that's something you have available, it might be interesting to us.
Okay, just further clarity, for the blue collar workers who have access to phones, and that's your main channel to them, do you have the cell phone numbers? Question one. And two, if for people who do use their emails, is it mainly company-based emails or personal and company-based email that's the best channel?
So for everyone, wholesale, everyone does have an email address.
Okay.
Yeah, because that's linked to all of our systems.
Mm-hmm.
For cell phone numbers, I don't know the percentage of district employees who have official work cell phone numbers. So that's hard for me to answer right now. But many of the people who do use their personal phones,
Mm-hmm.
they sometimes access district systems through their personal phones, if you know what I mean. Like probably going through a web browser and getting through that way. So yeah, the interface would have to be mobile friendly.
Mobile friendly. Okay. Thank you.
Is this a good time for questions or you?
Yeah.
So you talk in the RFP about kind of post-survey implementation, and it's looks kind of like a catch-all of coaching and training and focus groups. And the one thing that catches my eye is focus groups. Is that more of a discussion of bringing together management and explaining kind of the results and presenting it, or do you actually think there might be some augmented need for additional research among the staff that'll manifest itself in focus groups?
That's great. I anticipate there may be a little bit of both, and specifically for the consultant, the role would be advisory, not necessarily administering it or running it, but advisory, because it would just depend on specifically, what data are we trying to dig deeper into? What data are we trying to get clarity on? Because right now, just to give you some context, we're right now going through a pilot with another type of survey and on a smaller scale. So we're finding some value to focus groups. So if any of you have experience in that aspect of work, that'd be great. But that's something that I think would be helpful.
For those elements like the focus groups, and even more broadly in the RFP, are you looking for a partner that's going to bring you ideas that we can really collaboratively design together, or are you looking for a partner that's has a stock approach that's done it 100 times and putting forward something a little more concrete to start?
Well, I do definitely find value in seeing if any of you do have something stock that's been proven to work, and just to see, okay, what did you use and what context was that? How did that come out? That gives us some information for decision making. At the same time, I believe we may explore where we can together develop parts of it that are more, I guess, relevant or fits our situation better. So just know, it's good to know that there are some stock, and to see, especially, it kind of points to credibility and proven work, which we value. At the same time, I know in reality, sometimes those don't exactly fit what we're trying to achieve. So yeah, I think we value a little bit of both of that.
Awesome. And I'm curious, because it sounds like one of the reasons you're interested in doing focus groups is because you've had some real success going down that path with other smaller pilots. What has really worked about that process for you? What are some of the insights or best practices that have made that successful so far?
Well, I don't know if I'm going to answer your question correctly, so you can tell me. I find that the focus group has helped us get more clarification on data we collected, because there's always assumptions on data, because depending on how you ask the question and design the question, you're trying to elicit certain types of information back. Sometimes you get information back that wasn't anticipated, and you end up reading into it in a way where you're like, okay, wait, I'm assuming too much. We need to understand context here a bit. So that's where I feel like focus groups have been important. Also, the other benefit is some employees do not feel comfortable with a survey. They don't trust it. And I think they would rather participate in the conversation. So those are the two things that come to mind of the benefits we've done so far.
It's helpful. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I have like 5 more. I'm just waiting for creating some space for others.
Oh, you all can just jump in. We're casual here. Yeah, sure, Jim. Hi.
Thank you, Laura. Just quick questions along the same lines I think that Zane was getting at. You went through this process in 2014-15 with another consultant that came in. Can you share like what went well about that, or what maybe did not go so well that you would not want to repeat this time around?
I don't know if I can defer to my he's smiling right now. Barry Moten. Would you like to respond?
Yeah. So I think what went well about our engagement was that the facilitator was did do very broad questions, and we were able to kind of from the broad questions drill down into some specifics. They did again 10% focus groups for staff. After the focus group data was synthesized, we did kind of a conversation tour. So we went around and actually shared that data with we went all around the organization, shared the data, and asked people, is this a valid assessment of kind of what you see? If not, what would you add to this? And a question specifically about values. I think that was effective in launching us into some conversations, which led into kind of a series of work teams that we were able to kind of do and work on some specifics. I think the gap there was that while we did ask open questions, those open questions only were a snapshot of where people were at the time in terms of what their hotspots were. And it didn't necessarily ask them maybe questions that forced them to think about things they don't normally think about. And so there was a gap in terms of not having data, again, like people's sense of acceptance or people's sense of validation or people's sense about, things that maybe if I have to force rank something, what really is significant. So we were missing that that type of information. So we did go into that. And while the information was validated, there were still a lot of gray areas that we didn't walk away with information about. So.
Thank you.
As a follow-up to Jim's question, I'm curious about for the engagement survey, typically when we deploy a survey with clients, we'll separate it into validated questions versus curiosity questions. And the reason we make that distinction is because typically we'll come in with a few different survey formats that have been pre-validated and are all ready to go. But typically, and what I've seen in the RFP, it sounds like you have a few other things that you're curious about asking. Is your intention for the vendor selected for this to, scope out your questions and then have those validated for some type of result? Or are you comfortable having a distinction between validated questions that go towards work outcomes versus more of the curious side, things about values, things about more the subjective experience?
That's an interesting question, because one frame of thought that we've had whenever we have discussions about surveys or assessments in general is setting expectations, right? Because the individuals who participate, you end up impacting their perspective. They now have an expectation of action when you're asking these questions. So that's a hard thing to think about when you're saying, oh, would you like some questions just because you're curious? My gut is saying no. At the same time, it's hard to know what questions are actionable versus questions that are just nice to know. It's hard to identify that. So going through the discussion and about that would be something we're interested in having. So that coming to that development and decision making, that's where we're looking for expertise, because we have so many assumptions about what is actionable and what's nice to know. I think we need a different point of view to help us get clarification on that.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, building on that, I was wondering, how does communication typically work around EBMUD, especially if we're communicating about some of the actions that have been taken, or communicating that a survey and a focus group type of program is coming out? What are the typical ways that you interact and communicate with employees?
Okay. I'll
You mind if I?
Yeah, go ahead.
So we're in transition when it comes to communication. And just as an FYI, the organization is moving from kind of somewhat of a tribal organization. We had a lot of long-standing employees here. I've been here for 9 years, and when I first got here, the average tenure was 24 years.
Wow.
And so there was a lot of network, a lot of informal communication mechanisms that information traveled through. People felt connected. People felt like they were able to access information because they knew who to ask. So a lot of those informal networks were significant in how the organization has communicated. We're now at the point where we have lost a lot of that internal network because of retirements. And so we're still finding our way in terms of internal communication. And we have some pillars in place, but again, for the most part, that's an area we are still very much struggling to build a functional infrastructure when it comes to internal communication. So a lot of it is still organization-wide memos. We do have kind of an intranet, but it's not a personalized information-driven system. It's very much a collection of ideas out there. And again, and beyond that, there's kind of just an employee newsletter, which is again still kind of, it's a digital newsletter, but it's still one-sided communication. And for that reason, part of this effort is to create a feedback system. so that we have some way of getting some level of two-way communication going, so that we can be driving towards, again, just a bigger dialogue on a whole. So
That's excellent. Thank you so much.
Hi. So along the lines of before this, I took a very quick look at your strategic plan that you have in place. I know you have one for 2020. And I'm wondering if in implementing your employee feedback program, there is a tie-in with your strategic KPIs or whatnot. What makes it important from leadership perspective and from your organizational perspective? As you said, this is something long-term. So how does that tie in?
Yeah, it's interesting that you brought up the strategic plan, because if you for all of you, there's a strategic plan based on the mission of the district. There's also our DEI strategic plan. So in regards to what Derry was just saying regarding communication and feedback, it is it's actually called out to be one of our main focus is to basically improve the way we communicate, specifically about employee feedback. And we call it out because we feel like it is something that is going to impact our culture. So even though there's no measure of by this year we'll have this thing, right? It's not one of those where it ends by like, okay, if we have a survey, we're done. We've met the goal of the plan. That's not how we're seeing it. Basically, we have that plan to demonstrate that we are putting our priority into employee feedback and employee voice, and we are making ourselves accountable. So I don't know if I answered your question specifically, but us placing it in a strategic plan, in my own words or in my own view, is that it helps us to make it so that it's very obvious that you see what's important to us, and you can hold us accountable for making good on what our priority is. And we will continue to make sure our work contributes to those priorities set within that strategic plan. So this work of employee feedback is a big foundational piece for a lot of the pieces within the DEI strategic plan.
And how does it tie, like, what are you viewing in terms of from a timeline perspective?
Timeline. Hopefully to get okay, let me break it down this way. We're hoping to get the contract established and approved from the board this summer to get going on the work in the fall. So Derry, I'm looking at you because that's what we talked about last time. I don't know if anything's changed, but that's roughly where we would like to go. In terms of completing the work, that's a really vague question for me, because it would just depend on those first few planning meetings and understanding, okay, given our situation, I ideally would like to see the consultant be able to understand where we're at right now, to see if anything we have would contribute to what we're working on, and to see how that would impact our different milestones in getting things done. So it's hard to say when we would like an actual, say, survey, because the work wouldn't end with the engagement survey. It's a big piece that we feel like would be a major milestone. But yeah, we'd be interested to see like when that would happen, but we didn't actually set a date for when that should happen.
Good. So what I'm getting, just a quick summary, is that you have flexibility in that, but you'd like to have guidance and like really a deep partnership along the way to be able to figure out, what fits best for you.
Yeah, and just to give to be more clear, to give some parameters, since the contract itself is, oh my goodness, what is it? 3 year? Yeah, 3 year. So roughly speaking, and this is just me, I'm speaking only for me, not for the district. I'm seeing like, okay, if we have a 3 year contract and the big milestone is is saying in a survey, whatever that survey is. Hopefully that will happen, you know, maybe around year one, I'm assuming. I just don't know. You know, we haven't done something this big, that I have experience in. But that's what I'm hoping, you know, ideally, because like I said, the feedback program is more than just the survey. Because what's really important is how the data is collected, how we report it. Is it in a format where our managers and can have information for them to develop programs to be able to act upon it? You know, it's all about getting good information that we can move forward with, and hopefully the vendor would help in advising us on how to identify those early steps to come to the outcome that we're hoping for.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, as a follow-up to Jane's question, I'm curious if you're open to you know, starting a repeat of the cycle, you know, within that same 3-year term. Because typically our approach with clients will be to come in, do a survey, do focus groups, work with the managers, communicate out to the team, and then execute, see the result of that over a period of time, and then remeasure, go through the survey process again. So we have a clear, you know, benchmark and then scoreboard for what we've been able to accomplish. Is that something that you're open to, creating that longer term cycle and maybe ending the 3-year with another survey?
Yes, but it just depends. So yeah, definitely in an ideal sense, that would be the goal, is to be able to have it so that you could see how it performs through multiple cycles.
Mm-hmm.
And also to see you know, how our employees are interfacing with it, you know, because usage rate alone, participation rate, I mean, yeah, I mean, that would have to be there too to help
Right.
with that.
And it sounds like the goal is to build trust in the process over time and see, I imagine that probably
Yes.
the participation rate would be one of the KPIs that you're interested in tracking.
Most definitely, yes.
Or I had one follow-up question to that, and it's a little bit more philosophical. If you had to weigh participation versus quality of response, which one would you choose?
And quality of response means if it's actionable.
In depth, detailed?
That's hard. That's like, you want it faster, you want it cheaper. Yeah, I'll let Derry speak on that. I'm curious what he's thinking.
Yeah, I think as she's kind of alluding, there's kind of two things here, because there's technically 3 different organizations here. So you know, we have 2 enterprises, the water enterprise and the wastewater enterprise. We operate as one organization, but they're technically 2 separate organizations. And then within the water enterprise, there is this trades versus office dynamic. Usually if we want quality of responses and we aim toward quality of responses, we get the most responses from the water side white collar staff. So to kind of answer the question, we need quality responses from those other 2 groups. And so that's kind of one of the things, is because between those 2 groups, that's 2/3 of the organization in terms of actually it's more like 3/4 of the organization, to be quite honest. If you take all the operations staff and the wastewater staff, that's about 3/4 of everybody here in an organization. So one of the challenges that I think we get is that the characteristics of those groups are distinct, very distinct. And that's why the focus groups were important for us, because we were able to kind of get some of those tradespeople who didn't respond to paper surveys to actually speak up and say, this is what we think. And we do see that there's a big distinction between what they think, how they feel about the organization versus other groups who are probably more inclined to just jump on the survey and kind of take it. So I think for us, I think it does have to be, both considerations do have to be there, but I think in terms of engagement, where we really want to get the engagement is with the two groups who are probably least likely to take the surveys.
Thank you for that. That actually helps a lot.
Absolutely. Love the use of the word dynamic there. Appreciate that between the trades in the office. What have you seen be successful in earning trust with those groups so far? Where do they have the most engagement and why?
Well, I think with the trades groups, and with the with kind of a wastewater group is face-to-face presence. Most of them, again, even they were here working during COVID. A lot of them are anchored either to their projects or to their machines that they're working on. So they've been operating to a degree, especially the treatment operators are 24/7 operations. So they've never kind of stepped away. They've been kind of working the whole time. So what's important to them is face-to-face connection. And so for that's one of the reasons why the consideration of not even necessarily that we have to go face-to-face and give them a paper survey, which is one way, but to be face-to-face to introduce it and have the conversations about it and explain the access and those types of things. So I think I think that, to me, that's the big differentiator in terms of best practice is face-to-face connection. So.
Excellent. Do they have pretty good relationships with their immediate supervisors? What we've seen be the most successful is giving the supervisors a message to come to teams with in terms of the introduction of a survey like this, but it sometimes doesn't work if there is tension there.
There's the normal management versus us tension for them, and I think that's a big reality in that environment. We have 4 labor unions. And our union that's probably the most vocal is our laborers union, and it also happens to be where there's the most management averse group. So
okay, will it be important as part of this process to work with the union, get their cooperation or sign off or some other type of collaboration with these groups?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because building trust and communicating, those should always help dictate our actions and decision making.
Brilliant.
And that gets back to Laura's answer in terms of, Jane, the variables around the timelines is having those conversations and kind of prepping the organization for this process. So
in a sense, we won't be ready to launch until we really have the buy-in.
Yeah.
The recipients. Okay.
Yeah, they're aware that it's coming somewhere or another, but it always becomes different when it's about to happen.
Where it's immediate. Yeah. Well, what's the buzz been like?
Yeah.
Positive, negative, neutral?
Yeah, I would say neutral. Simply because part of it is okay, when we ask these questions, what happens next? So I think that's the major factor.
Excellent.
I'll ask a technical RFP question. There's a 5% bonus point for small business enterprise or disabled business, veteran business enterprise. Just clearing, to be clear, it's 5% no matter what. There's no compounding that.
Yeah, just the 5%. for any one of those, but not, yeah, not compounded. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Another technical question. I noticed there wasn't a ballpark budget range presented in the RFP. We just want to make sure that we're putting forward a bid that's reasonable and respectful, and because we could build something like this, anywhere from 6 to 7 figures. So do you happen to have a ballpark range that you might be looking at?
We kind of intentionally didn't put a number there. But I think realistic figures on this will, to a degree, kind of be based on kind of the services, right? And so, so again, because I think if we just say a number, then everybody can kind of, say what we get for that number. But because we didn't do a RFI on this in order to kind of test the market, we were just kind of open to just kind of see. Well, we happen to be kind of a relatively unique position right now in that we feel like we're resourced for this. So, yeah.
That's excellent. Appreciate that.
And I know there may be individual questions that you may not feel comfortable asking here. I'm just putting it out there. You can email me. So I just want to put that out there, and feel free to email me, and I'll try my best to do my research and give you some information.
Thanks, Laura. Is there anything that you wished we would ask, but we haven't?
No, but well, yeah. Are you all curious of who you'll be working with mostly? You're looking at me. It's primarily us and a few others on our team, as well as senior management team members as well. And probably I foresee ideally that whoever works with us would also be able to build a network of contributors to the effort, because I feel like this type of work, you may need to hear from other voices and other experiences from other parts of the district to understand what would work best for us as a whole.
Excellent.
Yeah, and along that line, and I'm sorry I was late coming in, but Laura may have mentioned this, is that we, this effort somewhat does include a series of employee-driven work teams, and as she may have mentioned, our values advocates, who are again a group of employees who are specifically banded together to think about work culture, internal communication, those types of things. Mm-hmm. Then our diversity steering committee. So we do have a diversity committee that is comprised of members of our affinity groups, and then managers from around the organization that are focused on diversity items. So those two groups in particular, mm-hmm. kind of employee-driven groups that at some level have some role in kind of thinking about both our distribution and how we manage some of this.
That makes sense. So them plus the 4 unions, and then are there any other key stakeholder groups that would need to be part of a collaborative committee to work on this buy-in?
Well, we are public information. Yeah, because communication planning, all of that would be key. So I foresee they would have everything.
Yeah, and as Laura mentioned, our senior management team, and kind of the representative leaders of there would be again our HR director, our leader of communications group, public information, as Laura mentioned, and the other person who's been kind of open to kind of deeper dialogue, and this has been our IT director, or CIO. So
Okay, that's brilliant.
One additional question, sort of as a follow-up to that. So based on some of the feedback by these stakeholders, the methods may change, the strategy may change, and the cost may change. So without that input up front and knowing sort of the leading, that the cost for the entire program might depend on some of the decisions that are made with discussions within those stakeholders. Is that fair to think about it that way?
Well, I think right now I think the strategy is pretty much agreed on internally here. So I think the strategy of having somewhat of a either biannual or whatever is good pace kind of core survey, and then these types of either pulse or other types of surveys anchored with that. I think we're pretty much aligned, that being the case. I think we're also pretty much aligned that we do want somewhat of a hybrid model here, and that we do want something that is kind of getting back to Zane's question previously, that is kind of validated questions that will allow us to benchmark, and then maybe some level of customizations that we do want to have that maybe are getting into some very unique things in terms of being a water agency and what that means for us. So I think those elements are solidified in terms of kind of what we want. I think what we're more open to is the pace and the tenor of those things. And as Laura mentioned, what are maybe some of the supplementary services that would come along with that in terms of data analysis or other types of things that would be maybe variables that would be more kind of maybe things that would modify cost. So.
Great, thank you.
What other questions do you have?
There's just looking at the RFP, you've got responses due April 7, anticipated contract start September 1. That's a pretty big delta. What all are you going to be doing in there?
Welcome to EBMUD. Okay. Yeah, there is the vetting process and selection process between that. So even after we make our selection, there is also an approval process. So just know at a very high level, we review the proposals, and then the next phase would be interviewing the contenders out of that review, and then making the selection. And then after we made that selection, then the back and forth communication of coming to an agreement on the actual contract. And then the contract itself needs to be vetted by different groups within our organization. We have our general counsel, our risk management group, and maybe a couple of other groups that just need to sign off on it. It's not their first time seeing it, but we're required to have them see it, the final version. And then it gets finally to our board of supervisors for official approval. And that explains the timeline, because that final step, and even some other intermediate steps in between, they all have very specific calendar dates in which things are processed and reviewed. Yeah, so I don't know if am I missing anything, Derry?
Yeah, the only other thing is that we're expecting we have to go this route is anything that's over $80,000 has to be approved by our board of directors. And so that's the other kind of timing item, because then we have to get on a board calendar and actually have that approved. So that's for the most part, that's what extends that timeline a little bit. Most of and again, I mean, it can move faster if a couple things occur, and that is we have somewhat of a boilerplate agreement that's attached to your package here. If there are no major modifications to that, then usually that can go pretty smoothly. If there are required modifications or recommended modifications, then again that does take more time. And again, like I said, once we kind of get to that process, we can then get on the board calendar and then get the contract itself approved, and then we're able to move once the contract is signed off.
Well, it looks like we're coming close to time, but I do want to put it out there that I encourage you to send me emails if you haven't already. I'll do my best to answer your questions, and we can go from there, because we would love to be able to have good communication from the very start. You know, get this work going and see what we can do. I'm looking forward to the proposals. And I'm really pleased that all of you have demonstrated interest and you're here. So thank you for your time.
Thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.